7, knowledge of the Absolute, verse number 16. Chaturvidaha bhajante mam, Chaturvidha bhajante mam, Janaha Sukritinaha Arjuna, Janaha Sukritino Arjuna, Arthaha Jignasuhu, Artharthi, Artho Jignasur Artharthi, Jnani Cha Bharatarshava, Jnani Cha Bharatarshava, Chaturvidha bhajante mam, Janaha Sukritino Arjuna, Artho Jignasur Artharthi, Jnani Cha Bharatarshava, Chaturvidha bhajante mam, Janaha Sukritino Arjuna, Artho Jignasur Artharthi, Jnani Cha Bharatarshava, Chaturvidha bhajante mam, Janaha Sukritino Arjuna, Artho Jignasur Artharthi, Jnani Cha Bharatarshava.
चतुर्विधा भजन्ते मां,
Chaturvidha bhajante mam,
जना सुकृतिनो अर्जुन,
Jana Sukritino Arjuna,
आर्तो जिज्ञासुरर्थार्थी,
Artho Jignasur Artharthi,
ज्ञानी च भरतर्षभ.
Jnani Cha Bharatarshava.
चतुर्विधा भजन्ते मां,
Chaturvidha bhajante mam,
जना सुकृतिनो अर्जुना,
Jana Sukritino Arjuna,
आर्तो जिज्ञासुरर्थार्थी,
Artho Jignasur Artharthi,
ज्ञानी च भरतर्षभा.
Jnani Cha Bharatarshava.
चतुर्विधा भजन्ते मां,
Chaturvidha bhajante mam,
जना सुकृतिनो अर्जुना,
Jana Sukritino Arjuna,
आर्तो जिज्ञासु अर्थार्थी,
Artho Jignasur Artharthi,
ज्ञानी च भरतर्षभा.
Jnani Cha Bharatarshava. Chaturvidha bhajante mam, Jana Sukritino Arjuna,
आर्दो जनस आताति
Artho Jignasur Artharthi,
ज्ञानी सब भरता सभा.
Jnani Cha Bharatarshava. Online. Chaturvidha bhajante mam, Janaha Sukritino Arjuna,
आर्तो जिज्ञासुरर्थार्थी, ज्ञानी च भरतर्षभा. चतुर्विधा भजन्ते मां, जना सुकृतिनो अर्जुना, आर्तो जिज्ञासुरर्थार्थी, ज्ञानी च भरतर्षभा.
Chaturvidha bhajante mam, Janaha Sukritino Arjuna, Artho Jignasur Artharthi, Jnani Cha Bharatarshava. Chaturvidha bhajante mam, Janaha Sukritino Arjuna. Artho Jignasurartharthi. Jnani cha Bharatarshabha. Word to word meaning. Chaturvidaha. Four kinds of. Bhajante.
Bhajante.
Render services.
Render services.
Mam. Unto me.
Unto me. Janaha.
Persons. Sukritinaha. Those who are pious. Arjuna. O Arjuna. Arthaha. The distressed. Jignasuhu. The inquisitive. Artharthi. One who desires material gain. Jnani. One who knows things as they are. Cha. Also. Bharatarshabha. O great one. Amongst the descendants of Bharata. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation. O best among the Bharatas, Arjuna, four kinds of pious men render devotional service unto me: the distressed, the desirer of wealth, the inquisitive, and he who is searching for the knowledge of the Absolute. Translation with repetition. O best among the Bharatas, Arjuna, four kinds of pious men render devotional service unto me: the distressed, the desirer of wealth, the inquisitive, and he who is searching for knowledge of the Absolute. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Unlike the miscreants, these are adherents of the regulative principles of the scriptures, and they are called Sukritina, or those who obey the rules and regulations of scriptures, the moral and social laws, and are more or less devoted to the Supreme Lord. Out of these, there are four classes of men: those who are sometimes distressed, those who are in need of money, those who are sometimes inquisitive, and those who are sometimes searching after knowledge of the Absolute Truth. These persons come to the Supreme Lord for devotional service under different conditions. These are not pure devotees because they have some aspiration to fulfill in exchange for devotional service. Pure devotional service is without aspiration and without desire for material profit. The Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu defines pure devotion thus: Anyabhilashita shunyam jnana karmadi anavritam anukulyena krishnanushilanam bhaktiruttama. One should render transcendental loving service to the Supreme Lord Krishna favorably and without desire for material profit or gain through fruitive activities or philosophical speculation. That is called pure devotional service. When these four kinds of persons come to the Supreme Lord for devotional service and are completely purified by the association of a pure devotee, they also become pure devotees. As far as the miscreants are concerned, for them devotional service is very difficult because their lives are selfish, irregular, and without spiritual goals. But even some of them, by chance, when they come in contact with a pure devotee, also become pure devotees. Those who are always busy with fruitive activities come to the Lord in material distress, and at that time associate with pure devotees and become, in their distress, devotees of the Lord. Those who are simply frustrated also come sometimes to associate with the pure devotees and become inquisitive to know about God. Similarly, when the dry philosophers are frustrated in every field of knowledge, they sometimes want to learn of God, and they come to the Supreme Lord to render devotional service, and thus transcend knowledge of the impersonal Brahman and the localized Paramatma, and come to the personal conception of the Godhead by the grace of the Supreme Lord or His pure devotee. On the whole, when the distressed, the inquisitive, the seekers of knowledge, and those who are in the need of money are free from all material desires, and when they fully understand that material remuneration has nothing to do with spiritual improvement, they become pure devotees. As long as such a purified stage is not attained, devotees in transcendental service to the Lord are tainted with fruitive activities, and they search after mundane knowledge, etc. So one has to transcend all this before one can come to the stage of pure devotional service. Thus ends the Transcendental Bhaktivedanta purport. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnana Janashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyata Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, as we saw in the last couple of verses, where Sadananda Prabhu was explaining as how to remember this chapter, HP 34 MB. So, as we see, hearing about the Lord as how that is important principle in actually attaining the highest knowledge, the perfection of life, and knowing everything that is to be known. Then, how to perceive the Lord in this world. So, that is the next section that was discussed. And then we saw about three modes of material nature, as how everything, these three different modes of material nature, be it goodness, passion or ignorance, they're all energies of the Supreme Lord. And how by being deluded by these different modes of material nature, one is unable to know the Supreme Lord who is above these modes of material nature. Then we saw how one can transcend these material modes of nature, which are very, very difficult to transcend because, as seen earlier, they are the energy of the Lord. And therefore, only those who can surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they can actually transcend the three modes of material nature. But as we see, it is not very easy to surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because the living entity, by conditioning, is rebellious, does not want to accept an authority. Because the common conception in the material world is that when one accepts an authority, there is a tendency or a propensity that the authority may cheat, or the authority may exploit, the authority may misdirect, misguide, or actually may not serve the interest of the individual. The individual's interest may be to do something, but the authority may say something else which may prevent, just like we see today in different countries, people revolt against the authority of government because they see, because of the government, there is different kinds of problems. There is economical problem, there is heavy taxes, there are different kinds of problems that may arise because of certain kinds of authorities, and people have a conception that we need to rebel or revolt against these authorities. Then we actually find freedom. And even this conception is even present in even day-to-day thinking and living. And therefore, in the modern Western society, the idea of freedom or independence means to live independent without any authority. And therefore, we also see that even children, they want to disobey the orders of the parents. They don't want to consider them to be an authority because they think it is not very beneficial. Similarly, the same conception is applied to even the spiritual idea that why should I surrender to a spiritual master or to the Supreme Lord or to his instructions. People think there is no real benefit. Rather, by following my own instructions, my own way of dealing things, I may actually find some happiness, I may actually find true independence, and so on and so forth. And therefore we see in the modern world different kinds of people who come up with different kinds of philosophies, different kinds of thinking and perceptions, which pursued them to go away from this principle of surrender and rather do things independent of the instruction of an authority. So as we see now, there are various kinds of people who can fall in this category, who do not want to surrender to the Supreme Lord, who have their own conception of what they should do and what they should not do. And we saw in the last verse, Namam drushkritino mura prapadyante naradamaha mayaya parita gnana asuram bhavam ashritaha. So we saw that these four kinds of people who do not want to surrender unto the Supreme Lord, Namam prapadyante, and they are being called as miscreants. Actually, even if one looks at the technical meaning of miscreants, miscreants means who do not want to obey the law actually. So they want to do something against the law or do not want to obey the law. So who are those people? So we saw briefly in the last class where Vikram Krishna Prabhu was explaining about the four kinds of people. The first is Mudaha, the foolish. So we saw the example of ass was given. As we see, an ass works very, very hard, not knowing what is the real purpose of why one should work, without knowing the purpose for whom one is serving or what is the real benefit of working so hard. So similarly, there are grossly foolish people who are simply working hard for some material gain. And they think that by enjoying this hard work, the labor that they are putting in, that is the real happiness, that is the real goal of life. So in this endeavor, they are just trying to fulfill their bellies. They are trying to fulfill the four basic necessities of human material life, that is eating, sleeping, mating and defending. Ahara, nidra, bhayamaituna. So those are the people who fall in the category of mudas. So for them, they think that the material gain is all in all. But they do not recognize that this material gain is very, very temporary, and this material gain does not actually satisfy their true needs. It does not actually lead them to the right destination or true happiness. So in this way, the first class of people who do not want to surrender because they want to work hard extremely and get some material gain and think that is the real ultimate goal of life, and they think, what is the need to surrender to the Supreme Lord? I'll just simply work hard and gain the material things. As we saw, the next category of Duskritina is Naradhama, the lowest of mankind. So as Prabhupada mentions in the purport that there are different species of life. Out of all these species of life, there are very few who are actually human beings. There are 400,000 species of life which come under the category of human species. Now among them, very few are civilized, and there are a large section of people who are uncivilized. And Prabhupada says, who are those who are civilized? Civilized are those who have some sort of regulated principles of social, political and religious life. So there has to be some sort of regulation in their social, political and religious life. But people who are only socially and politically developed but who have no religious principles must be considered Naradhamas. So in the modern society, in the modern education, we see that there is education about society, there is education about politics, there is education about ethics and so many other things. But they want to reject or remove religious principles from teachings. And therefore, they all fall in the category of Naradhamas. And I was just hearing some lecture today morning, and there a disciple of Prabhupada was mentioning that Prabhupada wanted a board to be kept in front of universities. I forget the exact quote that Prabhupada said that devotee was mentioning, but he was mentioning that you can enter this door if you want to become an ass. So Prabhupada was very clear that without following the real religious principles, or without really understanding what is the Swartha Gatim, the ultimate self-interest of the living entity, simply going through this education will not serve. Rather, it actually can act as a detrimental for one's own perfection of life. So there are a large section of people today who appear to have nice dress, they appear to have nice designations, directors, assistant directors. Even a common man today, who earlier they would have called salesman, today they have a title of business development. And it may sound very nice. Oh, this person is so societally developed, advanced. But without religious principles, one is to be considered Naradhama, or lowest amongst the humans. Then the other two categories of people is Mayaya Aparita Jnana. So they may have some sort of erudite knowledge, they may be scholarly, they may be academically well qualified to speak well, to write well, to think well, but because they are influenced by the illusory energy, the material energy of the Lord, Prabhupada says they are like philosophers, poets, literary people, scientists, etc. But because they are misguided by the illusory energy, they disobey the orders of the Supreme Lord. So they sometimes come under this notion that by their mundane logic, rationality, their certain amount of scientific understanding, they can actually solve the problems of life, or they can understand everything. And therefore they think whatever the skills that they have, that is sufficient in itself to actually solve the problems of life, or attain the perfection of the life. In this regard, it is very important, in another place Prabhupada mentions that there is a difference between skill and knowledge. Prabhupada says that the modern universities are only providing skills. Skills means someone may be very good at programming, someone may be good at some writing skills, someone may be good at some other engineering skills. But these skills are different from knowledge. Knowledge means which must be absolutely true and which must be absolutely beneficial. But simply by acquiring this academic skillful knowledge, that by in itself is not sufficient to solve any problems of real life. These are only meant to help one work with the societal modes, the societal constructions. Within those systems, they may be able to perform well. But in terms of real life, it is not necessary they actually perform very well. And so is the reason why there may be many students, professors who may be at very good schools, may be doing wonderfully well in their so-called professional life, but that does not necessarily mean that they really understand their real goal of life, or who the Supreme Lord is, and what they should do, what they should not do. So this is another category of people who have certain skills, who have certain knowledge, but not the real knowledge, which is as described in the Shastras. Then there is the fourth class of people, that is Asuram Bhavam Ashrita, of those who have demonic principles, or who are openly atheistic. So they have different arguments because they are envious of the Supreme Lord. So they say, how can Lord come into this world? How do I know that the Lord exists when everything is going on its own? Without understanding the Lord, I can explain the entire world and its functioning. Then what is the need of understanding this Supreme Lord? So I will do everything which is against the religious principles. And therefore we see a large section of, especially in today's age, we see there are a large number of, at least a couple of famous scientists who proclaim themselves openly to be atheists, and they encourage people to become atheists. And they think that in this way, all the so-called dogmatic religion, or the religion which is dogmatic, we don't have to be suppressed by those principles. Rather, by being openly atheistic and accepting that, we are actually leading a free life. So in this conception, there are different kinds of people who lead their life, but not all of them are like that. And therefore we also see sometimes people come to temples, people come sometimes to attend various programs, Now, so people there are who do not surrender completely, and then there are some other class of people that, as we see in this verse, Chatur Vidha Bhajante Mam Jana Sukritino Arjuna. So Chatur Vidha, the four kinds. So as we see, this is also Chaturmasya, the 4 months of the rainy season. So the word 4 is also used in many other places. 4 kinds of foodstuffs which are offered by the spiritual master, the Supreme Lord, as we sing every day in the morning. Chaturvidha Sri Bhagavad Prasado. So here there are specific 4 kinds of things, 4 kinds of people are being mentioned here. Chaturvidha Janaha Sukritino. So there are 4 kinds of pious people or pious men. And what do? They render service. Prabhupada translated bhajante as render services. In other place, Prabhupada also writes worships. So they worship the Supreme Lord, or they render service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As we see, Lord Krishna is speaking this to Bharatarshava Arjuna, that there are 4 kinds of people who render service unto me. And who are these 4 kinds of people? These 4 kinds of people are Artho, Jignasur, Artharthi, Jnani. So Arthaha, or one who is distressed. So as we see, people can become distressed in this material world. There's no one who is not to be distressed. But even though one may be distressed, it is not necessary that one will come to God. In fact, people may use that as an excuse sometimes to even go away from the God. They may say that, oh, I am always suffering. Where is God? If God is there, why there should be suffering? Why there should be any evil? Why there should be any killing? Because God is not there, this is all happening, and therefore I don't have to be God-centric, or I should not be having, I should not believe that there is God. Rather, I should believe something else. But on the other hand, people who are actually pious, or Sukritinaha, they do not think that way. They think, oh, I am distressed, I am actually unable to solve this problem of my life, and therefore I should approach the Supreme Lord. So unless one is not pious, then even though one may be in any of these 4 states, that is, of being distressed, or being inquisitive, or being desirous to gain some material gain, or even to seek the true knowledge, or the absolute knowledge, one may be interested in this, but there has to be some pious credits, so that in these situations, in these circumstances, one turns towards the Supreme Lord, or one renders some devotional service to the Supreme Lord. Otherwise, these situations can make one go away from the Supreme Lord also. So those people who do not have enough pious credits, they may be in this situation, they may be inquisitive, they may be very, very inquisitive, but they will be inquisitive about how to do something bad. The goal, just like a thief, Prabhupada says, he may be very, very expert, he may be very, very skillful, and he may steal bank money from a big bank. But he is using his skill, knowledge, whatever he has got, but because the purpose is not correct purpose or beneficial purpose, he is to be called as Dushkritina. Whereas when the purpose is right, when one is using one's distress, one's inquisitiveness, one's desire to gain material wealth or knowledge in the service of the Lord, or to in connection with the Supreme Lord, then that becomes a pious activity, or he is considered to be pious, Sukritinaha. So now it is important to understand this in light of, so as we see in this purport, Prabhupada is always comparing these 4 kinds of people who are rendering some kind of devotional service to the Supreme Lord with regard to pure devotees, and how they compare. This is very important to understand. So this is one important point that we can take from this verse, is how do we see this in light of pure devotees. So it is important to note that as we see the word Mahatmas, Prabhupada, as we see even in Bhagavad Gita in the very next chapters, we'll come to see the definition of Mahatmas. who are always under the energy, the divine energy of the Supreme Lord, the internal energy of the Supreme Lord. Another place Prabhupada says that Mahatmas means who have only one object of worship, that is Krishna. And they only know Krishna, and they only know their only purpose of goal of life is to worship Krishna. There is nothing else they know, and there is nothing else that they do. Now these are to be considered pure devotees, Mahatmas. They only know Krishna and they only want to serve Krishna. There is nothing else beyond that. But those are to be considered pure devotees. Now, not everyone can be on this platform, at least at the same point of time. So everyone, especially in the material world, is making progress, and therefore one can be in the other grades of devotional life. That is, as we see, as mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam and also in Ishopanishad, we see that there are three categories of devotees: the Kanistadhikari, the Madhyamadhikari, and the Uttamadhikari. So Uttamadhikari is a Mahatma because he is always constantly engaged in the devotional service of the Supreme Lord. So the Uttamadhikari is also known because of his firm faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, firm faith in the devotional service, the firm faith in following the orders of the spiritual master, and Uttamadhikari is also able to understand the essence of the Vedic literatures, and basically is very expert in understanding, in studying and understanding the revealed scriptures, and he is also able to put arguments in terms of those scriptures. So basically a Uttamadhikari can present the conclusions of the Vedic scriptures perfectly. He is very expert in that, and he is also perfectly executes the instructions of his authority, the spiritual master, and perfectly understands that the ultimate goal of life is to attain the transcendental loving service of Krishna, and the only object of worship and love is Krishna. So in this way we can see a Uttamadhikari or a pure devotee. So that's why these principles are very important to note, because sometimes people may come across various devotees, and sometimes one may not be able to make any distinguish, they may not be able to distinguish between who is what kind of devotee, and sometimes they may go and hear from some devotee from whom they should not hear, and they may get confused and perplexed. Oh, he is also a devotee, he is also a devotee, everyone is a devotee, then why is some things not working? So it requires some intelligence, and that intelligence is to recognize the different classes of devotees, the different categories of devotees. And then as we see the second class of devotees, the Madhyamadhikaris. So the Madhyamadhikaris, they have firm faith that in the understanding that the goal of life is to worship Krishna, but they may not have a complete understanding of the revealed scriptures, and they may not be able to present the conclusions of the Vedic literatures by quoting the scriptures. So although their faith is stable, but they are not they fail to offer arguments and decisions on the strength of the revealed scriptures, to especially to an opposing party, and therefore they are called Madhyamadhikaris. And then there are Kanistadhikaris or neophytes, whose faith is very fragile, whose komala is not very firm. The faith can change. Now if someone comes and gives another kinds of philosophy, or someone argues against, their faith may shake. They may go away from devotional life and do something else. And neither they understand the scriptures very well, and neither they can quote the scriptures very well. So therefore the neophyte devotees can waver in their devotional service. And in continuation with that understanding of the different categories of devotees, these four kinds of devotees also fall in certain category of neophyte devotees. They fall in the category of devotee for the fact that they approach the Supreme Lord, or they render devotional service unto the Supreme Lord, but again they do under certain conditions, they do under certain circumstances, and therefore they are not to be considered as the pure devotees. And as we see here, the first is that of the one who is distressed. Now, Bhagavatam presents different examples of all these categories of devotees, and one example of distressed is of Gajendra. So Gajendra, an elephant, was fighting against crocodile. The crocodile which caught its leg in the lake. The Gajendra was, although elephants are to be considered very strong, but in water considered strong than crocodile, but because elephant was in water body and crocodile is considered to be more stronger in a water body, Gajendra was unable to rescue itself, was not able to overcome the struggle in fight with crocodile. And therefore, being distressed, the Gajendra remembers the prayers and offers prayers to the Supreme Lord. And in this way, because of the condition of being distressed, but before that, Gajendra was very happy living with its family, other elephants, enjoying, and so on and so forth. But unless that the situation of distress did not come, Gajendra was not rendering devotional service. But as soon as the distress came, Gajendra started to offer prayers to the Supreme Lord for protection. Now, in this process of offering protection, eventually Gajendra becomes a pure devotee of the Lord, and so on and so forth. Similarly, the desire of wealth. So similarly, as we see in the case of Dhruva Maharaj was very much afflicted with pain, and also when he saw his stepmother insulting him and is not allowing him to sit on the lap of his father, and he ran to his mother, and in great anger he was trying to see what is the solution for this. But then, based on his instruction of his mother, he goes to the forest, and as he meets Narada Muni, Narada Muni gives him various instructions, and one of the things he says, you must be satisfied. But Dhruva Maharaj says, that is not for me. It is for some other people who are highly elevated. Maybe they can be satisfied in any condition, but for me that is not possible. Give me some other instruction. I cannot be simply satisfied in both the gain and loss. And actually, one who is highly elevated is supposed to be equanimous in both conditions of gain and loss. But Dhruva Maharaj says, no, I do not want to remain satisfied in this condition, but rather I want to have a greater kingdom. And therefore, he also desires for wealth, and in this process, by the instruction of Narada Muni, he also renders devotional service. As we see, as he comes in touch with the pure devotee of the Lord, and as he was engaged in devotional service, he also ultimately gets purified and becomes a pure devotee. Similarly, we also see those who are searching for knowledge of the Absolute. So, or the wise saintly persons. So, the 4 Kumaras, Sanaka, Sanatana, Sananda, Sanat Kumara, they were also to be considered jnani or knowledgeable, but only when they come in touch with the Lord and when they come with the fragrance of the tulsi leaves, that they are attracted to the devotional service of the Lord, and they become devotees of the Lord. Similarly, the sages of Naimisaranya, they were very, very inquisitive. They were asking a lot of questions to Sutta Goswami, explain us what are the essence of the scriptures, and so on and so forth. So they're asking very, very significant, important questions to Sutta Goswami. So in this process of being inquisitive and hearing from Sutta Goswami about Krishna, and by being inquisitive and asking questions to Sutta Goswami, and Sutta Goswami explaining the glories of Lord Krishna, in this way they attain perfection. But it is important to note here that in these examples there is some association of the pure devotees of the Lord or the direct mercy of the Supreme Lord. So one of the important principles is that even though one may be in these four categories of life, unless one does not come in contact with the pure devotee of the Lord, it is not actually truly beneficial just remaining in this state of life. So only if one is fortunate enough to associate with pure devotees, and when one is rendering devotional service in these states of life, that one can actually move to the next stage of devotional life, that is the progressive stage of Madhyamadhikari and Uttamadhikari. If one doesn't come under the association or in contact with the pure devotee of the Lord, one may ask, offer prayers, worship the Lord. Sometimes we see people come and they say, we are very, very distressed, our work life is causing us a lot of problems, we want to take to devotional service. And within few days, as in material life, we see the difficulties sometimes reduce a little bit. And as soon as they find there is some relief from their problems, they again go back to doing what they were doing. So the idea of devotional service here becomes only for that moment of time. And then they could vanish again, become busy in their material life. Similarly, someone may ask for wealth, and as soon as they find that they have achieved some wealth, especially as we see in Andhra Pradesh, there are so many devotees of Balaji. So people go because they may get a visa, or they may increase their business by many folds, and therefore they agree to give some amount of wealth back, or they may even forget the Lord after getting that wealth which they are asking for. And in this way, they will again get swayed away by the illusory material energy, and they again get lost. Or sometimes one may be very, very inquisitive, one may ask very, very good questions, and so on and so forth, but that if the inquisitiveness is not directed by a pure devotee of the Lord, it leads to philosophical speculation, it leads to mental speculation. And therefore we will see there may be so-called critical thinkers, so-called intelligent people, but unless they don't come in contact with the pure devotee of the Lord, they do not know really as what to ask, and what is the conclusion of what is being asked, or what is true. That even though one may be inquisitive, one may not be able to reach, one cannot reach actually without being associated with the pure devotee. And that is what also Prabhupada explains in a couple of places, the importance of associating or coming in contact with the pure devotee. Similarly, searching for the knowledge of the Absolute, there may be many people who are searching for the knowledge of the Absolute, and one class of people are those who are actually frustrated of material life. So because they get frustrated of material life, they think, okay, my now goal of life is to actually acquire real knowledge, and real knowledge means which is opposite to material life. That is everything is spiritual, Brahman realization, or understanding that there is no truth about material life, and to become a Mayavadi or a monist. So in this conception of life, people also think that they are finding some sort of happiness or doing some things, but again, unless one does not come in contact with pure devotee of the Lord, one will not be guided towards understanding the other aspects of the absolute truth, the Paramatma feature or the Bhagwan feature of the Supreme Lord. So in all these cases, there is, although a certain amount of devotional service is being rendered, but unless one is not actually coming in contact with the pure devotee of the Lord, one cannot move to the higher stages. And just to touch upon one more category of classification of different kinds of people who are, at least in this case, they are rendering some service, devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As it is said here, Chaturvidha bhajante mam. So they are at least rendering service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But below this, there are many other categories of, one cannot call them clearly devotees, but one can call them perhaps slightly more pious. So they also fall under this category of where Prabhupada says they worship themselves as the Supreme. So this is another category of people. Prabhupada mentions another purport, that some may think that the Supreme, oneself to be the Supreme, and start worshipping. As in the case of Mayavadis, when they are liberated, they think they are also Supreme and non-different from the Brahman, and they address each other as Narayana and also worship oneself. or someone may consider some imaginary form of the Supreme and start worshipping. They want to accept some form of superior authority, but they do not know what exactly the Supreme is, Supreme Authority is, who the Supreme Lord is, and therefore they concoct some form. Or they may assume someone else to be Supreme and they start worshipping them. Or some other people may just confine themselves to the universal form or the entire cosmic manifestation as the representation or as the Supreme entity, and they just worship the cosmic manifestation. So in this way, there are different categories of people who worship different things, different people. There are the categories of people who do not accept to surrender to any kind of superior authority. And then we see, on the other hand, there are pure devotees of the Lord. So in this way, there are different categories of people. So it is very important to see how one can actually advance. The advancement, as we see again in Prabhupada is mentioning, that not only those who are pious, they have to come in contact with a pure devotee to make advancement, but the glory of a pure devotee of the Lord is such that even if one is a miscreant, even one falls in this category of mudaha, foolish, grossly foolish, simply working hard, or naradhamaha, lowest of mankind, the maya aprita jnana, the deluded speculators, or the asuram bhava ashritaha, who directly profess that they are atheistic. All of these people, if they meet a pure devotee, if they come in association with a pure devotee, they can become pure devotees. Not just normal devotees of one kind or the other kind. Prabhupada mentions in the purport, but even if some of them, by chance, when they come, the miscreants come in contact with the pure devotee, they also become pure devotees. So this is the importance and significance of associating with a pure devotee. Actually, it is a very, very rare opportunity to associate with a pure devotee. It is not at all easy, and we can see in the life of Srila Prabhupada how Srila Prabhupada could induce people who are not interested in devotional life, who are who are hippies. Some of them were Mayavadis, and some of them were atheists. Many of them were atheists. Some of them were having some conception of life, some conception of God, but not really knowing what the real meaning of the scriptures are, or what does it mean to worship God. There is different classes of people who came in contact with Prabhupada. But simply by associating with Prabhupada, their all life got transformed. They all took up to devotional life. And as we see in the purport, Prabhupada explains that Sukritina means who follow the regulative principles of the scriptures, or those who obey the rules and regulations of scriptures. So generally, it is very difficult for people to follow the rules and regulations of scriptures. By nature, it is very difficult. And therefore, we will see people living a very life away from any of the regulative principles. They do not want to be confined to any principles, anything which regulates them. Rather, they want to be non-regulative. But as we see, only after coming in contact with the pure devotee of the Lord, that the four regulative principles, no meat eating, no intoxication, no gambling, no illicit sex, which are so hard for people to avoid, becomes so easy. So so-called Dushkritina people of Kali Yuga, only by coming in contact with the pure devotee, can actually become Sukritina, or one starts to obey the rules and regulations of scriptures. Without obeying the rules and regulations of the scriptures, it is not possible for us to become submissive. It is not possible for us to appreciate the higher principles of devotional life. It is not possible for us to understand what it means to surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, only by which we can overcome this stringent laws of material nature, We can only by that we can transcend the modes of material nature. But that will not come to us unless we do not follow the rules and regulations of the scriptures, or the as that, and even more it is important that rules and regulations of scriptures are under the direction of a bona fide spiritual master. Because even for a common man to actually understand the rules and regulations of scriptures is very difficult. But only under the direction of a spiritual master one can actually understand what are the real rules and regulations of the scriptures and how one should execute them in a practical manner. So this is the mercy of a pure devotee, and therefore in that association, that's why the touch of a pure devotee is very important. And therefore when books are distributed, when one comes in touch with Prabhupada's books, one is actually is in the process of becoming Sukritina. Because in this modern world there is no place which is training anyone, because in order to become Sukritina there has to be training, there has to be education. And therefore actually Prabhupada writes in another place that following the rules and regulations of scriptures means to follow Varnashrama dharma. That means one must be trained in order to become a Brahmana, Vaishya, Shudra, Kshatriya. So there has to be certain training as how one can become a Brahmana or Kshatriya or a Vaishya. If there is no training, if there is no education, then there is no possibility of them actually being that. And especially in the modern society, there is no place. And therefore, in gross way, there is no really following of any rules and regulations of scriptures. And secondly, Prabhupada says, the other way to actually follow the rules and regulations of scriptures means to actually execute the principles of devotional life or bhakti yoga. So even if one is able to execute the principles of bhakti yoga, that means he is actually following all the rules and regulations of the scriptures. Because as we see, the aim of all rules and regulations of the scriptures is so that one can remember Krishna always and never forget Krishna. So this is the sum and substance of following all the rules and regulations of the scriptures. So there are many rules and regulations of the scriptures, but simply by taking to the devotional process, which is a shortcut, by doing that, one can actually one is actually following all the rules and regulations of scriptures. In another place, Prabhupada says, following rules and regulations of scriptures means to giving up all the bad habits. Without following the rules and regulations of scriptures or the bhakti yoga as given by Srila Prabhupada and the Acharyas, it is not possible to overcome the bad habits. So someone may say one is good, but it is not possible, because one will only hover on mental platform. One will not be able to acquire the right method to actually become truly Sukritina. So the association of pure devotee and following the principles of bhakti yoga summarizes the following of rules, all the rules and regulations. Another important point that we can see is that Srila Prabhupada, a pure devotee of the Lord, always wants to give pure devotion. So as it is mentioned in this purport, Prabhupada mentions, quotes Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu and defines what is pure devotion. Anyabhilashita shunyam jnana karmadi anavritam anukulyena krishnanushilanam bhaktiruttama. So one should render devotional, one should render transcendental loving service to the Supreme Lord Krishna favorably and without desire for material profit or gain through fruitive activities or philosophical speculation. That is called pure devotional service. So actually, to render service Krishna favorably, so to render service favorably is not very easy, because there is always a selfish interest. So one who is truly Sukritinaha, who is actually truly following the principles of regulative principles, can render favorable devotional service. Or one who follows the instructions, and so in order to actually render devotional service favorably, the association of Vaishnavas is very important, because in the association of Vaishnavas we understand what is favorable devotional service and what is unfavorable devotional service. At the end, the devotional service is rendered by a devotee in order to please the Supreme Lord. But Supreme Lord, who is a person, has likes and dislikes. And therefore, one has to be very, very conscious when one is rendering devotional service, whether one is doing in order to please the Supreme Lord or one is doing with certain other objective, certain other intention. So, we will come to know as we execute our devotional life in day-to-day life, we can also see whether our authorities are pleased or not pleased. Is spiritual master pleased or not pleased? These are very important parameters to keep in mind. Sometimes devotees may think, I will just worship the Supreme Lord directly, or I will worship the spiritual master directly, and I will not care for the Vaishnavas. No, it is, as we saw even in today's class, Prabhupada mentions, Dasa Dasa Anudasa. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's principle of who am I is, I am the servant of the servant of the servant. So when one has got this conception and one is able to render favorable devotional service in the association of the devotees, and whenever an opportunity to serve comes, when it is done favorably, one is actually making progress. Because that attitude of doing things favorably is carried on further when it is also rendered, when one renders service to the spiritual master and to the Supreme Lord. And similarly, there is always different calculations, different intentions behind one's activities. But it should be to please the Supreme Lord, not for any material gain, not for any speculative, not based out of some philosophical speculation that one renders some sort of service. Because that service is not pure devotional. That is definitely some devotion, that is some amount of engagement in Krishna's service, because there is some connection to Krishna. But actually, if one really wants to be experiencing the joy of devotional service, one has to aim to render pure devotional service. So unless one doesn't come to that platform, one will be not experiencing the joy of rendering devotional service, because among the various qualities, the first quality is that pure devotional service brings all auspiciousness. It brings all happiness, and the material distress is vanquished. And unless the material distress is not vanquished, one is not able to focus one's mind. And anyways, so just to conclude, it is described here that there are 4 kinds of pious men who render devotional service, and they are the distressed, artho, or jignasur artharthi, the inquisitive, the desirer of wealth, and the gnani. And we will see in the next verse who amongst them is considered better and why so. So, but we should all recognize that we all may be falling in different categories of devotional devotees, but we should all endeavor in the association of pure devotee through his teachings, and in the association of Vaishnavas by rendering devotional service, we advance and move towards pure devotion. I'll stop here and see if there are any questions or comments.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Four kinds. I know that distress and
So Artho, one who is distressed.
Artha is
Jignasur is one who is inquisitive.
inquisitive. Yeah.
Artharthi, one who is desirer of wealth. And Gnani, one who knows things as they are or who is in search of the absolute knowledge. Okay, if there are no questions or comments, we'll stop here. Granthiraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande. Hare. Thank you for joining. Hare Krishna.